Hello and welcome. If this is not your first time here, you may have noticed we're going to be moving forward under a new name, Dungeon Bloom. Formerly known as No Modifier, which was my internet handle for well over 20 years. I'm still going to be sticking to the philosophy of sharing my creative process guided by prompts and random rolls. But I think Dungeon Bloom better captures the unfolding nature of the dungeon crawls that I build here. So with that, let's get on to the review. 1993 tabletop role-playing games. Dungeons & Dragons has been out for a couple decades at this point. There was no internet, but the games were highly lethal and focused on the dungeon as a living entity. So let me introduce to you Central Casting Dungeons from the Central Casting series. It says right on there, Ultimate Dungeon Construction Guide. So we know what to expect. This was by Task Force Games, 1993. And we're just going to kind of take a dive right in. So we have telling you that's invaluable. If you want to know more about Task Force Games, don't worry. You can contact them on the Genie Computer Network. And if you don't have that, you can call them at this 800 number, so it won't even cost you a quarter. You're totally toll-free. Now, this is system neutral. Central Casting Dungeons Generic Dungeon Creation Aid for use with fantasy role-playing games. So back 93, we had like GURPS, RuneQuest, probably by that Warhammer. Well, the Warhammer Fantasy it might have been a miniatures battle game by then, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. You couldn't even say compatible with Dungeons & Dragons or World's Greatest Role-Playing Game. At that time, TSR, I believe CEO or president or whatever was Lorraine Williams, and anytime anybody did anything that was perceived as a copyright infringement, they would get a cease and desist letter. So it was kind of you can look on YouTube or articles on the internet for that crazy time. This series was invented by Janelle Jaques, famous for dungeon design. She was almost there from the beginning, all through Dungeons & Dragons history, and even working outside of TSR before she went to video games. So that's interesting in this artifact in itself. I think the really cool little item that they have is they have these quotes in here from these different characters. So right away on the cover, there is one by Brubnub, a goblin guard. And he periodically says something about the book. But there's these two characters, Bertrand Stoneback, a dwarven warrior, and Harsvend, a legendary elven thief, that they go back and forth throughout the entire book. So they laid it out kind of weird in my eyes. Maybe it makes sense to more people to do it this way, but they start off with the construction, and they give you tips of like what happens if your door overlaps or corridor goes through a corridor, because you're rolling these tables and you're doing everything more or less randomly. But then after you do that, then you roll for the background of the story. Why was it built? What you can pick traits for the civilization that inhabited the dungeon, and then why was it abandoned? And then if you even want to go further, I would just say if you wanted to make a castle or a fortress or anything but I guess a tomb, they call it an active dungeon, which would just be, I don't know what you call it now, an adventure site. Not really, well, I guess everything's a dungeon, right? So they give you ideas on spacing and so forth, tell you they got 15 easy steps how to build a dungeon. What I like about this book and just keeping it system neutral, well, and not only that, but just the stippling art, so cool, so 80s really. This is the early 90s, but it's a very 80s. All illustrated by the same illustrator. Pretty cool stuff. Very reminiscent of the Basic Expert 1983 character. Okay, let's get back to the why I liked it, because of the generic nature of it. The encounters and treasures, they have, each room will have like a level from A to E, but then you also roll a D100 and the level can go up or down. So think of the encounter levels as challenge ratings. So A would be the easiest and E would be the hardest. So A is, unless you're unlucky, surprised, or stupid, you could get by that encounter with a few scratches. And then it goes up to major injuries may result, and then it goes, major injuries are likely, death is a possibility only at level C. D, major injuries will definitely arise from this encounter. And then level E is runaway. Your party is not going to be able to survive this encounter. So that leaves it up to the dungeon master to set the challenge rating. Now they did the same thing for the treasures. So a couple pieces of gold or some silver, something that a peasant could earn in a week or a month. And then E would be totally, like I would say, it says the reaction of many greedy adventurers after coming face to face with a treasure like this is either to stand slack-jawed and salivating for several minutes without moving, or to let out a wildly excited scream and dive headlong into the largest pile of gold. I would say that would be like your legendary items, and then everything in between. And then the random encounter table gives you A, B, C, either 1 at A, 2 at A, 1 at B, 1 at C. So they never have the random encounters be something so dangerous that you could end up with a TPK or something like that. So A, B's, and C's. And C is very unlikely. It's a 98 to 99 on the table. So to construct your dungeon, you start at table 100, and that is going to give you the spacing. And then you go just follow table 100, table 101, general entrance. Very straightforward. You follow on 102, and you get all of your entrance features. These are all entrance features. So just on 101, 102, 103, and 104. So that's going to give you a lot of juice for your narrative. The very first room is 105. But then there's also first rooms for different, I would say, dungeon types. So you got the first room for a fortress, so it skips off. I don't know why it's not 105A, 105B, but I'd say if somebody would go ahead and recreate this book today, I would probably make it more follow that, like an outline. But you got your fortress, your tomb, and then your doors and corridors. So it lets you know by your spacing what the lengths are going to be, the length of the corridor. So you got that roll, and then corridor possibilities tells you where the doors are as you're moving through or moving down the corridor or up the whatever you're moving through a corridor, I guess. It will tell you how many doors, where they are, if the corridor turns right, left, continues. So basically, you would just follow through all of these steps, and you end up with an entire dungeon, and then you add the details after. That's kind of like what I do. I thought this was a neat entry, is the zoo. Well, of course, it's going to be empty because the dungeon is abandoned, right? But I thought that was cool. It has different pen sizes. Maybe you could even figure out what was in there. It says it has a cool role-playing tip too. It says sometimes a noble places valuables in a secret compartment hidden in his or her zoo. A large carnivorous beast excelled as a guard. That's a pretty cool idea. So you got that, or even in the floor of a zoo pen. I thought that was a neat idea. And then we have different ways out. If you want to like keep adding exits, and then you can, so you basically, all right, I found, you would roll this, then you just go to page table 501, and then it will tell you on the D100. Oh, here we go, there we go, 501A and 501B. Okay, so sometimes they did it and sometimes they didn't. And then, just follow steps. 2, check to see if the exit's trapped. 3, determine whether the exit is concealed. 4, add it to your map. 5, add treasure and encounters. Different features. You have traps. You have, and this is where I was saying, I like to have this, I would probably do this first. Why was it built? Because I think form follows function. Whenever I am building a dungeon, I like to know, well, you know what I do. I'd like to start with the name, because that kind of conveys what the general vibe of the dungeon is going to be. I don't know if I want to figure out what it was after I built it. I would say, especially when it's like, is it a standard fortress or a tomb? Well, you're not going to draw out an entire dungeon with an idea in your head, and then you figure out that it was a tomb. So it'll tell you like how many rooms you have. Oh, and let me just to go back to the beginning. It also has a little small section on when is my dungeon done. Well, it's done whenever you want. So that's pretty cool. That they still have what I've been telling you is just like, if you don't like the role, if you don't want to go and explore farther in a certain direction, you can just be done with your dungeon. You think you have enough to keep your players interested, there's enough interesting scenarios for them to discover and interact with, there's features of the dungeon, then you're done. I mean, there's no point in overdoing stuff. But they go by rooms, or you can do a standard dungeon purpose, fortress, and tomb. And then they also have the surrounding countryside, which you can maybe go by what other hex it's on in your hex map. I like that it's pretty much thinks about all of it. I mean, it even has like, it has the different what I was saying before, the different civilization traits, like were they artists, were they pacifist or militant, were they mundane or magical. So you're building out this whole backstory. Like I said, I'd like to see this in the front, and that way when you start making the actual architecture of the dungeon, it kind of falls in. Because if you're doing a lot of military rooms, and then you get down here and they're pacifists, I mean, why do they have an army? Maybe it just doesn't make that much sense to me, but this is a cool section here. We'll use a few more illustrations as well. But the dungeon abandonment tables, that's a really neat idea. I will probably be using this quite a bit for background. Was it slowly abandoned? Was it quick? Has it all been looted? Was there a siege? Is there something that an unseen danger? Like you get there, you go in here, you don't, say you're on a quest to find a legendary item at, you can roll, like nobody knows why this civilization disappeared. Well, you can roll on here, but you want to make it something. You have an idea that you want an unseen danger, so you roll that it's still fully active, or slightly lessened, so and so, but it's gone, but it can return at any time. So like some sort of magical curse or invisible monster. It kind of takes me back to the this one in particular takes me back to like watching old Doctor Who episodes where they would show up somewhere and there's a monster stalking everybody and there's not too many people left. Monsters cause the abandonment, plagues and poisons, even some natural disasters. And then, like I said, I said earlier, they have active dungeons. So you can make a total fortress, almost like an outpost or something, or you can make any kind of settlement using this book. But that, again, so you're going to go through and you're starting at table 100, and then you get to the end and you're like, oh, well, is it active or not? And then they wanted you to do the story for your dungeon at the end. That seems backwards to me, but well, however you feel like you like to do it, that's up to you. So I think that is, and then they of course give an example, walk you through the entire process. And then they give you an example one that with everything that they rolled up and an actual map, all the different keys, pretty tightly typeset, 2 columns. So does this have modern application? I would say if you play like a modern game like 5e Pathfinder game, if you are good at converting relative power into challenge ratings, I think this could be very useful. If you're playing OSR type games, of course this is useful. You just still have to be good at figuring out the power level relative to your character's level. So I think that's a kind of, well, you've heard it before. I mean, shifting role-playing to cinematic combat rather than, I don't know, puzzles and the ecology of the dungeon. I think something was really lost. Modern games prioritizing heroics over survival. I don't know. Maybe it's just. I mean, it is personal preference, I guess. Survival. I like role-playing games as survival horror genre. That's basically what it is. You're going into a hole in the ground with a piece of steel in your hand and hoping to come out, right? So, I think definitely am gonna have to give this like uh, I don't know, like I'd say 8.5 out of 10. It's definitely a must buy if you struggle with blank page syndrome or you have a lot of trouble getting started. Just rolling through some of these tables should get you rolling pretty good. Um, I like that it doesn't really tell you a story. It gives you the tools to let the story happen. And definitely a tool that you should have um, for any dungeon master. Okay, I think that is about it for today. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.